Hey guys! Today we'll be covering a 2017 drama film called Daisy Winters. After writing a poem about fear, 12-year-old Daisy Winters jumps off a tree in her backyard. Daisy lives with her single mother, Sandy Winters, who is terminally ill. As she narrates her poem, she goes off to the playground to ride her bike. From her porch, Sandy and her gay best friend Kathy eagerly watch Daisy. Later that night at dinner, Sandy tells Daisy she shouldn't ride bikes with boys who are older than her. However, the girl shrugs off her mother's advice. Meanwhile, Kathy interrupts their conversation and reveals that she has a new girlfriend. Daisy wonders if Kathy will be okay when the relationship ends, but the latter assures her that this relationship will last a lifetime. Here, we learn that Kathy attempted to take her own life when she was dumped by a former partner. The girl then tells Kathy that she has written a poem about her suicide attempt. Sandy thinks her daughter is crossing the line, but Kathy wants to hear the poem. After dinner, Daisy presents her sorrowful poem, which makes Kathy emotional. Despite this, she praises the poem. Once Kathy takes off, Sandy is upset that she doesn't understand her daughter sometimes. But Daisy defends herself by saying that she wrote the truth that resonates with Kathy's life. The following morning, Daisy's best friend Jackson knocks at her door for school. As the two walk down the street, they see their neighbor Bill, who is heading to his office. From their conversation, we learn that Bill is an unhappy man who spends most of his time alone. Daisy comments that Bill is probably depressed. At school, when the teacher asks everyone to write a poem, she notices that Daisy has written a poem about her neighbor Bill. In the next scene, we see Daisy with her new friend Josh, who has just moved into the neighborhood with his dad. While getting to know each other, Daisy reveals that her mother Sandy is sick. Sandy has terminal cancer and doesn't have much time to live. At this point, Sandy and Jackson arrive on the scene, and Sandy asks her daughter to take a plate of cookies over to the elderly Louise's home and also to Doe, who lives next door. Reluctantly, Daisy and her friends go over to Louise and Doe's and bring them the cookies that Sandy has made. After their work is done, Jackson comments that Doe is really weird and suggests he uses drugs. Later that night, Daisy tells her mother about her new friend Josh. She likes him as he isn't like the other boys from 7th grade. Meanwhile, Sandy has news for Daisy. Daisy's aunt, Margaret, is coming over tomorrow and staying at their place for a couple of days. From her expression, we can tell that Daisy hates her aunt and is rather upset at the news. The following day, Aunt Margaret arrives and cannot wait to see how much Daisy has grown. Margaret is both strict and close-minded, unlike her sister. As soon as Daisy joins her mother and aunt at the dinner table, Margaret cannot stop comparing her children with Daisy. She thinks Daisy is an undisciplined child who has grown to be rebellious, which isn't quite typical of a girl. She adds that her daughter Rebecca is a rather studious girl with straight A's. Since Aunt Margaret can't stop boasting about her children while berating Daisy, she gets up and leaves the dinner table. A while later, Sandy informs her sister that Daisy feels sorry for disrespecting her. Margaret thinks Sandy should discipline her child more, but the latter believes that she has raised her child right. Meanwhile, Daisy sneaks out of her room and listens to her mother and aunt talking. Sandy isn't feeling well, even though she is getting continuous treatments for her cancer. Should anything happen to her, she wants Margaret to adopt Daisy. Margaret promises she will take good care of her niece. Overhearing their conversation, Daisy is upset that she might have to stay with her aunt. The following day, while going to school, she vents her frustration to Jackson, but the calm guy assures her that everything will be okay. As they walk, they notice they haven't seen Bill heading off to work lately. Furthermore, when Daisy checks Bill's parked car, she notices that it hasn't been used for a while. Later that afternoon, when they return home, the kids discover that Bill has taken his own life. Daisy talks to one of the officers, where she reveals that she knew Bill was going to do it. This statement makes the officer think that Daisy might have some insight to help in their investigation, so she and Jackson are taken to the police station. In the next scene, we see that both of their mothers are bringing their kids home from the police station. Daisy tells her mother that she didn't realize that her statement could get her and Jackson in such a situation. Back at home, Daisy realizes her aunt has been going through her stuff while her and her mother were away. She quickly confronts her aunt, insisting that she doesn't have any right to pry into her life. Margaret replies that she was just curious. The following day, Daisy and Jackson visit Louise, who lives down the street. Louise is equally curious and intrigued by the sudden death of Bill, as the two kids are. After their visit, Daisy and Jackson decide to find out what happened to Bill, so they sneak into his house to look for clues. Meanwhile, Doe from his window notices the two kids loitering around the place. The kids enter Bill's bedroom, but quickly hide when Bill's parents also arrive there. In the next scene, we hear Daisy's voice in the background stating that nobody really notices what's going on within a person's life, not even their parents. Bill's parents couldn't see that their son was depressed and still cannot believe that he is gone. This incident prompts Daisy to make a plan to escape her adoption by Aunt Margaret. We learn more about her plan later in the movie. Daisy and Jackson return from Bill's house, and on their way they come across Doe, who informs them that he knows what they are doing. As tough as she is, Daisy threatens Doe, saying that she knows what he is growing in his backyard, which is weed. But Doe doesn't seem to care and quietly takes off. Next, the duo come across Josh down the street. He introduces his friends to his father, Robert. Daisy is intrigued that Josh's dad has a motorbike. She quickly asks if Robert can teach her how to start the bike, and he kindly obliges. After Josh and his dad leave, Daisy comments that Robert is very cool and that Josh is very lucky to have a father like him. Later that night, Daisy plays with her guitar while Sandy takes a warm bath. The two sing their favorite song, and Sandy comments how they should enjoy every moment together while it lasts. Later, Daisy gets a call from Aunt Margaret, who is checking in on her sister. The girl transfers the phone to her mother, and when Sandy starts speaking over the phone with her sister, Daisy records her mother's voice. The recording is part of her plan. The following day, Daisy and Jackson watch Bill's funeral from afar, and later on, visit his gravesite. Sitting in front of the grave, Daisy hopes that Bill is happier now, wherever he is. The kids then take off before anybody sees them. One day, Josh visits Daisy's place and she reveals that her mother is a photographer who owns her own studio at the house and shows him some of her work. She then hands him one of her mother's business cards in case he ever needs her services. Later, Josh returns home and Robert notices the card tagged as Sandy Winters. For some reason, this makes him sad. Over dinner, Sandy wants Daisy to do her a favor if things don't go as planned, which means if she passes away. She wants her daughter to mail 3 letters to their respective addresses. She has written one for her daughter as well and asks that Daisy only read it after she is gone. Daisy obliges, but she hates the fact that her mother is already preparing for her demise. Their conversation is interrupted by Kathy, who has come to inform Sandy that her girlfriend Helen wants to go to Mexico for a trip. Kathy is torn about taking the trip while her best friend is so ill. However, Sandy insists Kathy go and enjoy her life. During their conversation, we learn that Sandy actually had an affair with a married man in the past and ended up getting pregnant with Daisy. But she never told him about Daisy, and Daisy doesn't know anything about her estranged dad. Next, Daisy runs over to Louise's house to get a package that she ordered and had sent to the latter's address. She lies to Louise, saying that it's a surprise for her mom. Once back in her room, Daisy opens the package, and we see that it's a life-sized human doll. In the following scene, Daisy checks a list that contains things like rope, pulleys, dolls, and recorders, as she continues to get multiple packages through Louise. It's Halloween, and Daisy and Sandy are dressed as witches. Children come to their house trick-or-treating, and the mother-daughter duo happily indulge the trick-or-treaters. When Daisy notices young girls with their dads, she asks her mom to tell her about her dad. But Sandy doesn't reveal anything at all. One day, Sandy gets a call from the hospital and realizes that she is quickly running out of time. Devastated, she sinks to the ground and starts crying. Just then, she gets a call from Josh's dad, Robert. He got her number from the card that Daisy had given to Josh. From their conversation, we realize that Robert is the married guy Sandy had an affair with in the past, meaning that he is also Daisy's biological father. Robert offers to meet over coffee, but Sandy tells him that she will think about it and hangs up the phone. In the next scene, we see Daisy and Jackson tying a rope around a tree in her backyard and testing the pulley that Daisy had gotten earlier. Later that night, Sandy finally tells her daughter about her affair with the married man, but doesn't reveal that the man is actually Robert. The following morning, Daisy wakes up but doesn't find her mother in her bedroom. She goes downstairs and sees Sandy sleeping on the couch. Sadly, when Daisy tries to wake her mother, she doesn't respond. Mourning for her mother, Daisy changes into black clothes and prepares for a funeral herself. She gets the human doll ready and keeps it on her mother's bed so that others would mistake the doll for Sandy and wouldn't know about her demise. Daisy then gets the pulley, ropes, and the coffin for her mother's funeral. At this moment, we realize that Daisy has been planning to conduct her mother's funeral in secret, so others won't know about her demise. She fears that she has to live with Aunt Margaret if anyone finds out about it. Later at night, she asks for help from Jackson to drag her mother's coffin to Buries in her front yard. However, she doesn't reveal anything to him. Meanwhile, from across the street, Doe has been watching everything and knows about Sandy's death. After she finishes burying her mother, Daisy puts some white flowers over her grave. She then reads an emotional poem about love and divinity before falling asleep at her mother's grave. The following day, she carries on with her normal routine, telling everyone that her mother is just sick, including Jackson. Meanwhile, Doe comes over to Daisy's house and observes Sandy's grave. Not far from the grave, he notices a misplaced letter addressed to Robert that Sandy had written. Doe picks up the letter and takes it with him. As days pass by, Daisy continues to lie to her teacher and neighbors about her mom. When Aunt Margaret calls to check in on her sister, Daisy plays her mother's pre-recorded voice, making Margaret believe that she is talking to her sister. One day while riding her bike, Daisy trips and breaks her arm. Seeing this, Doe comes over to help and offers to take her to the hospital. In the next scene, Daisy and Doe return from the hospital and she thanks him for helping her out. The following morning, Doe comes over once again and brings some brownies. After taking some bites out of the brownies, Daisy realizes that they are pot brownies. While she is high, Daisy finally reveals her mother's death, but Doe tells her that he already knew. He understands that she doesn't want to stay at her aunt's since he was also brought up in foster care, which he hated. Suddenly, Daisy's teacher comes by to visit Sandy since she has missed 2 parent-teacher meetings, which is very unusual for her. Daisy manages to lie to her, saying that her mom has been busy with her new boyfriend. Meanwhile, with the days passing by, Doe and Daisy's friendship begins to foster as they spend most of their time together. In the next scene, we see Doe in his room holding the letter that he found in Daisy's front yard. One morning, Daisy notices some police over at his house. Doe then approaches Daisy and asks her to take care of his dog, as he is in some trouble at the moment. With him gone, Daisy also decides to leave home. Just then, Robert approaches Daisy and tells her about the letter that her mother had sent to him. It turns out that Doe had delivered the letter to Robert before he was taken by the police. Daisy finally learns that her father is Robert. She then reveals her mother's death and shows the grave to Robert. A while later, Aunt Margaret arrives at the house and learns about everything. Since Daisy now has a father to live with, she doesn't have to go live with her aunt. The final scene of the movie shows Daisy finally addressing Robert as dad, as the two embrace each other with open arms.